Let's go to Dan. Hello, Dan. You're up next, sir.
Hey, Bart, Happy New Year.
Hey, Happy New Year, Dan. How's it going?
It's going good.
All right, man. You got a hand here from the Parks. Is that right?
I do. I normally play down in Maryland at MGM National Harbor, but for the holidays, my parents live in Philly, so I usually go and play Summit Parks.
That's awesome. When did you play here? Was this around Christmas time or
So
what?
yeah, so I played the Friday and Saturday before Christmas, and then the Tuesday after Christmas.
Okay. So that's like a lot of times when people have off and you see some out of towners and people like to go and play. It's just a thing to do, like an American thing to go gamble when you're with your friends, like for the holidays. So,
Yeah, right, exactly. It seems like a really good time to play. It's usually a lot of action. And so, yeah, so I was playing 10-10 there.
okay. That's a game that
Uh,
is one of their like core games, right?
Yes, yeah. And Tuesday, Tuesday apparently they usually have 5 to 8, 10-10 games going, and they do a triple. They call it a triple game where they do a 10-20-40 or 10-20-50. They get a couple of those going on Tuesday.
Right. So, how deep are you here?
So I was a 4,200 effective stack with the main villain.
What's the normal game you play over in DC?
I play the 2-5 or the 5-10 typically
Okay,
in
so
DC.
5'10". So you have some experience at this depth.
Yeah, I have some experience at this depth, and it
Okay.
was it was a straddle, so it was 10-10-20.
Okay.
And just a little bit of info kind of about the setup, which is sort of why I played the hand the way that I did, was the guy to my left was really not very good. He was like V-pipping like 90%. He was never raising, and I had probably taken 2,000 off of him already. He was probably down 4 to 5,000, just not a very good player. And he was directly to my left, and then the guy to his left we were both kind of like trying to get him into hands. So my assumption was that he was basically not going to be doing much raising, but he was going to be doing a ton of calling, and then he wasn't playing very well like post flop.
Okay.
So I'm under the gun
hmm
with 8 of diamonds, 7 of diamonds.
Okay.
And so I was pretty much every time I was opening, I was making it 60. I'd say on the table was people were opening from between 40 to 60. If there was a limper, they'd go 80, but I was making it 60 every time I was opening.
So you went to 60.
I make it 60, and sure enough, the guy to my left calls me, and then the guy to his left calls him. And it comes around to the small blind, who was like I got the sense he was a reg. He was a younger Asian kid, but he had not been playing a ton of hands. He seemed like a fairly solid player. And he was talking with guys at other tables. You could just kind of tell he was probably a reg there.
Okay.
So he raises the 200.
So he three bets to 200. That's
Yeah.
really small. 60 call, and he's going just over 3x.
Yeah, I thought it was a little bit small.
And you're 4,200 effective with the small blind, and how deep are the other guys?
So the guy to my left had probably just bought in again. He probably had like a stack of 3,000. And the guy to his left probably had about 4,000, 5,000.
Well, here's the thing about this setup with this like kind of stupid small raise here out of the small blind. Basically, you never want to call in this spot. This is a very, very negative EV call for a number of different reasons. The first being that you're going to be in the middle. Because he made it so small, I can almost guarantee you that the guys to your left are going to call. Like, you can sometimes get away with calling in spots like this with hands you don't want to play from the middle if the 3-bet size is so large and you think the guys are just going to go out to your left. But here, if you call, these other guys are going to call, and that's a terrible spot to be in with a suited connector. It's much better to have a pair here, flop a set and then just be, or not flop a set and just be done with it. But to realize your equity here is very, very hard with two people to your left. But the sizing here is so small, it seems kind of like BS sizing. So this on paper is a 4-bet or fold, and I kind of lean towards a 4-bet here, because the sizing is so weak, but I don't want to call in between here.
Yeah, well, I was getting ready for you to definitely criticize maybe my pre-flop and flop plays. In a normal scenario, like if I was playing 5-10 normally at MGM, I would probably fold with two competent guys to my left. I just felt that like I wanted to get the guy directly to my left in as many hands as possible. And so that was sort of what I was thinking. And so I normally wouldn't call in this scenario, but that is what I ended up doing here.
But here's the problem with that, though. And this goes back to really basic 15, 25, 35 old school crush live poker stuff where we used to talk about back in the day. It's kind of an antiquated notion now. Well, if you can make 25 times like the raise size here, it's 140 back for you to call just to, the implied odds of a direct suited connector. But you're going after the tight range of the preflop 3-better. How can you imagine how hard it is to win a big pot off of the guy to your left with 8-7 suited that just did the initial flatting? It would be one thing if the whale was there and you're like, this guy's got a big pair and I can just break him. But he's not even the one that has the strong range driving the hand right now.
Yeah, he had not been really, he hadn't been driving any of his hands. Like I said, he was basically just calling almost all the time. And no matter what the raise was pre-flop, he was just calling. He wasn't aggressive at all. So I guess it was kind of tricky trying to figure out exactly how to target him other than trying to get into hands with him because he was just bleeding chips.
From out of position with a suited connector, I don't know, man. I don't like it. So he calls and the other two call as well?
Yeah, so it's 4 to the flop, I think like 830 or something.
So +1 calls and then MP calls and the pot to 830. And that, that was definitely going to happen with the small sizing.
Right.
Yeah, so going to be hard to play this one. Okay.
So the flop comes ace of spades, 8 of clubs, 6 of clubs.
And even before you tell me what happens here, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Like, if you're heads up closing the action, even if you didn't even necessarily have the betting lead, you could call a bet closing the action from the guy in the small blind. I know the hand's not set up that way, but if the small blind bets, you can't call with these guys behind you with 8-7 here. It's just way too hard to realize your equity because what ends up happening is if another guy calls in between, even if the guy in the small blind doesn't have an ace, you can see how much harder that is to ever realize your equity. That's just the setup. And then if the small blind checks now, your hand isn't necessarily even strong enough really to put in a bet. It would kind of be like bleeding money off. So what ended up happening here?
Yeah, no, I know is bad spot, and I sort of needed, a miracle card. So so the small blind led for 300.
Yeah, so small blind leads for 300. You have 7-8, right? And the board is ace 8-6.
And I don't have any backdoor flush draws, but obviously a 5 or a 10 gives me, some more, gives me up and down straight draws.
Okay. Yeah, this is, for me, it's a no-brainer fold here.
Yeah. Well, no, I know. That's like that I said. I was getting ready for some criticism, both pre-flop and on the flop. I was just targeting the guy to my left and knowing that he's, not going to raise anything here. So I made the bad play and I called.
The other thing too is that your kicker brings in straight, so you can't even be comfortable with that if it goes multi-way. Once in a while, I guess you could throw in a raise post-flop here to drive out people that might have a single paired ace behind you, and the small blind could just fold. I almost think raising is better than calling here, but I would do way more folding. So you hero calls, and then what happens?
The other two guys fold.
All right, so fold. So the other guys are out of there, the one that you wanted to get in with. So it's 1430 here.
Correct.
Well, at least that's good for you anyways. The only thing I'll say about that is that it would actually suggest that the small blind is more just combos wise and probably hand composition wise. If you assume that the guys to your left are not folding an ace, this means that it's probably more likely that the small blind actually has an ace because those two guys just folded out. You don't have an ace, so.
Yeah, at this point, I'm thinking he probably has an ace and just want to kind of see what happens on the turn.
All right, so what's the turn?
The 8 of spades.
Miracle.
Right, exactly. Yeah, like I said. Yeah.
Miracle, yeah.
So, here's the thing, and I start, the way I'm thinking about it is obviously any one of me or the two guys behind me could have had an 8 pre-flop. The guy next to me to my left, if he had an 8, he was almost assuredly going to call the flop. If he had a 6, he was probably going to call. So when the 8 comes, I'm thinking that it's, I clearly can have an 8 here, and I'm kind of thinking that the guy's an ace. So
you think you should have an 8 here?
I'm saying I can.
Right. If I was in your opponent's spot, though, I would never think that you would have an 8 here.
Yeah, you're putting me on a draw or
should be an ace plus or some sort of draw.
Right.
Yeah.
So he leads for 900.
All right. So small blind bets 900 here. Now, obviously you don't know this guy. You think he's a reg, and, you can play a little cat and mouse here about how fundamentally sound you want to play live or how balanced you want to play live. When you're playing against some good opponents, there are times where you take strong hands and then just play them as either check calls or call downs in a given situation. And it almost seems like if you just call here on the turn, it gives your opponent the ability to try to bluff you off a weak ace or think that you might have missed a club draw just in case he doesn't have anything, he has a bluff. With that being said, he probably is very ace-x heavy here when he does bet into U3 on the flop. Now, if you just call, the pot's going to be 32-30. You guys have put in 12, like 4, you'll probably have 2,800 left. And so you're still only with like one pot size bet left. So it's not like you need to necessarily build here. So, I mean, I always advocate for fast playing. It's really hard for me to imagine being in this spot, but at the same time, with that being said, now there's some action killing cards out here too. Sometimes you get into these spots and it's like, oh, I call and now the front door comes in, the club comes in and the backdoor spade comes in, and you lose out on the value that you would have had from ace X. Because if you raise here and I was in the small blind, I'd be like, my God, this guy that could never have an 8 here, he's only representing like a really, really thin value range of like 6s full. But a lot of people, it's just a weird spot to raise, so I don't know if I would be a non-believer or not. With that being said, though, I would try to go 3 streets from the small blind with ace, king, ace, queen. You look like you're like a double flatter here with like ace, queen, ace, jack. That's why I kind of want to call here, but there are a lot of action-killing cards here too.
Yeah, I called with the idea of, hoping, it would be a strong call, hoping to, make a little bit more on the river.
Well, you just hope that something doesn't come in to kill the action. 3240 here to the river, right? 1800 plus 1430. Yep. Okay.
The river's a 6 of diamonds.
6 of diamonds. Wow, that's just an absolute gin card for you. Because the reason why that's a gin card for you is because, again, if I was the pre-flop 3-better here, I'd be like, this guy should never have an 8 here. So it's either 6 is full or he has, I guess, yeah, you can't even have an 8 because it's ace of spades, 8 of clubs, 6 of clubs. So it's not like you can have, there's no flush that would trip up here. I mean, the only 2 value hands I would think that you would ever have here would be like quad 8s or quad 6s. So I would, and if I had ace king, ace, probably even ace queen, I would bet the river, I think. But again, you don't necessarily know how strong this player is.
Yeah, I mean, would he, from his standpoint, would he want to try and let me bluff? I mean, a lot of the, if I have a flush draw, I miss. If I have some kind of super weird straight draw, I miss. I mean, if you're in his shoes and you're trying to figure out how to get money, I don't know. I
would not check ace king, ace queen here if I was that guy, because you're going to check behind with an ace that you're going to call with. And I don't think that you bluff like front doors either, because look how strong the guy looks like. If he checks the river, it looks like he's going to check call. There is one hand that I washed over, which might be ace 8 suited, as somebody in the live chat said. There's only one specific combo of that, ace 8 of hearts. I still don't think, maybe I guess the hero could be in there with ace 8. That's one combo. So you could go quad 8s, quad 6s, ace 8 of hearts if hero didn't 4-bet off pre. But if I was the villain here, this is just, again, it's like kind of like a live hack. Like you're doing, I just think you have a much higher composition of ace X that might call down here versus hands that are going to bluff at the end. So, I mean, that's my take.
So, and if you're the villain, is your only size, an all-in for 2,800 for his remaining 2,800?
If I had ace king, I might size down a little bit. I might make it like 16, something like that.
Right.
Yeah, I might make it like 16. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So he shoved for 2,800.
So villain 1 shoves for 2,800. I mean, if I'm in your spot, I snap call. Here are the reasons why I snap call, even though it looks kind of scary. If I have pocket aces here, I want to size down way more or do something else than if I have ace king, because it gives you less of a chance of having an ace, right? It's all about what you think your opponent's range is. It's worse for him almost to have aces in the sense of like, well, aces full beats an 8 here, right? But he still aces full still loses to quad 8s and quad 6s, and if he's got the ace of hearts, you can't have ace 8 suited. So I want you to have more and I'm just assuming you never have a bear 8 or a bear 6 here, which you really shouldn't, even though you do. I want you to have more combos of ace X that can call. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for an all in here with this run out the way this hand went with aces full. And if you call and he has aces full, tap the table. But I mean, this is I snap.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think obviously I was ever thinking about folding. There was some interesting table chatter afterwards, but I mean, it was again, I was playing sort of more splashy than usual, and I think the table was as well. So I guess I was thinking to myself that the way the table was playing, that I could have an 8 here, that he should be thinking about that, and his play seemed so strong that I thought about it for maybe a minute and a half, and I called. He had ace queen.
Okay, there you go.
And it was interesting because not the kid who lost the hand, but a couple of the other people at the table accused me of slow rolling because I took a minute and a half to call.
Well,
so
it's not a slow roll; it's a nit roll. The thing about, and I've talked about this many, many times, the term slow roll is so misused. Slow roll means, listen, all these terms are made up. Slow roll is a blatant act where somebody is making it look like to the other person that they're going to win the hand. And like, if you had said, oh my God, I got nothing here, blah, 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 and trying to make it look like the guy had won the hand, or if you called and said, like, I call you, I think you're full of shit, I have king high, and then he rolls over ace queen and you have an 8, that's a slow roll. This is a nit roll, meaning that you just took too long to call with a hand that should be a snap, but you're not maliciously trying to be in a situation where you're trying to like tilt the guy, lying about your hand. Slow roll is all about the intention of the person that is doing it. And I always giggle about this too, because in PLO, you see this happen quite commonly where somebody doesn't even realize they backed into the nuts. Like they're looking around at their hand, and then after a minute, they figure out that they have the nuts. And then, somebody's all in front of them, and then they call. And then the guy who's all in accuses them of slow rolling them, even though it's pretty obvious that the guy couldn't even read his fucking hand. You know what I'm saying? So it's a nit roll as opposed to a slow roll.
Yeah, I mean, I just, in my mind, again, he just seemed very strong the way that the hand had been played. And so I was thinking to myself, ace king, sure. But if I'm him and I have ace queen or ace jack, I'm thinking to myself, like, what is my opponent, me, going to, like, how are you going to get called by worse if you have ace queen or ace jack is sort of the way I was thinking about it from his perspective.
Well, listen, Dan, I said I still think ace queen plus is a bet here. The sizing might be a little bit ambitious. Yes, the sizing might be a little bit ambitious because I don't know. Like, say, for example, you were in here with ace jack of hearts instead of having 7-8 of diamonds, right? The hand probably, I don't know if maybe you would do more 4-betting in that spot pre, but let's say that you called. The hand probably would have gone down the same way, right? On the flop and on the turn, I assume, unless you're saying that you might fold off sometimes on the turn. And then on the river, the question is, do you call with ace jack for 2,800 versus say like 1,600 or like ace 10 suited? Something like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it the way that he plays it seems so much like ace king or aces. I guess maybe ace queen, but again, I'm just, from his perspective, it's such a large confident shove that I just, I'm just sitting there thinking, what's he expecting to get called by? And if somehow I have a bluff, or if somehow I've missed a draw, does he want to kind of let me try and bluff at
I'm
it?
asking you, would you fold if you had ace jack or ace 10 of hearts here at the end?
I think based on what I'd seen at the table so far, I would have folded ace 10 or ace jack. I think so.
Okay, so you could say that the sizing was probably too large. What if you bet 1,400 at the end? With ace jack,
With
ace
one
10.
of those hands,
Yeah.
I probably would call.
That's why I said that I think that that's sort of more kind of smarter sizing in his spot.
Right.
But I think that 2,800 with aces full is way worse than 2,800 with ace queen. And then again, I'm making the assumption here that you don't really have an 8, which you shouldn't, even though you ended up with it. So, so anyways, but I mean, the pre-flop, I think, is really where this one went off the rails personally.
Yeah, no, I agree.
All right, man. Thank you very much for the call.